Welcome to Risk Engineers Talk Governance. In this episode, due diligence engineers Richard Robinson and Gaye Francis discuss AI, robots, controls, and liability. We hope you enjoy the episode. If you do, please give us a rating. Also, subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. If you have any feedback or topic ideas, get in touch via email at admin@r2a.com.au.
Hi Richard, welcome to a podcast session.
Hi Gaye, welcome back.
We're going to talk today about AI, robots, controls and liability, and this sort of pops up as that we've given a number of board presentations, and some of our clients have asked us, there's a lot of AI coming, robots coming, how do we have to implement them in our business and what does it mean for us? And I think from our engineering due diligence perspective, it's all about control. AI and robots both present potential controls to address safety issues of concern, and how can they be implemented to improve safety.
And this is a leading thing, and one of the points we keep hammering is that the legislation and WHS legislation is crystal clear in its objective. You've got to achieve the highest level of hazard control that is reasonably practicable. And it's perfectly obvious that AI, in its many manifestations, is going to enhance things. And the example that was the most obvious is the self-drive cars. And we have a lot of clients that drive long distances. I mean, the elimination option is just to do everything
Remotely or over the phone.
Over the phone and that sort of stuff. But if you've actually tried to run serious meetings, you've got to just decide after a while that if you really want it to work, you should try to do it in person. And so if you've got to drive long distances, what's the way to do it? Now, traditionally the way to do it, if you had to drive out of hours, make sure you take two people and one person keeps the other one awake. The other option is to put a self-drive car, which is basically a form of AI, to help you get there. And if you start nodding off or something strange happens, it will start doing things. I don't suppose it's going to have a sharp object and poke you or anything like that. But it's got to
elbow in the arm.
Whatever the previous version was. But you'll get advice that something's got to happen. And if you truly did fall asleep, it'd just pull over the side of the road and stop. And everyone else just keep passing past you rather than you becoming a hazard in itself. Now that's a form of AI. And I don't actually know any clients so far who's actually deliberately bought Teslas to achieve this outcome. But it's something I think you'd have to say why you didn't do it if you were called up after the event and a horrible car accident that could have been prevented.
And that's the question, isn't it? People are asking, in terms of, is it reasonably practical in terms of AI and robots? And you've got to show why it's not reasonable at a time.
Correct, and it will change. It's one of the points why standards are ineffective, because they're lagging indicators, and the mandatory aspects of putting AI in cars, that'll take several years to get there after it's proven to be beneficial.
I think one of the difficult concepts that the clients that we work with are grappling with is the liability issues associated with AI and robots. Who takes responsibility, as you said, in the event that there's an accident afterwards. And the way that we've sort of seen it implemented at this stage is it's always a secondary function.
Correct. It's the backup. It's not the prime. It's like the watchdog we did for the railways in New South Wales. There's a GPS watchdog checking where the trains are, and if they get to a certain proximity, the watchdog will bark. Now, that's a hardwired thing. There's no intelligence in there at all. But obviously just looking at such a system and you say, how could this be enhanced if it had AI? Well, presumably it would actually look at all sorts of other factors, like where track gangs are, who's doing what over there, what the weather conditions are, and provide the driver with further knowledge and assistance beyond just what it currently does.
I think that's one of the real strengths with it. It's the provision of that situational awareness and information that then people and humans can make informed decisions.
Well, it's like when we talk about the marine pilots, which you do a lot of work for. I mean, they have this personal pilot unit these days, which is their own independent nav aid. But it's got, apart from satellite navigation, it's got all the GPS, weather forecasting and all sorts of things. And if a sudden squall was coming their way, rather than the pilot having to positively check all the time what the weather's doing, they would just sort of say, new weather report. The squall's coming faster than was anticipated.
So that information is just presented rather than the pilot actually having to go and look for it.
Correct. So all these sort of improvements and so forth that you might get, you can just sort of see. I mean, we had the other discussion about, you're a parent in a house with a kid, and you're disappeared off the toilet and the kid's found a knife and is heading towards the PowerPoint. Well, it'd be nice if the AI chirped and said, "Kid with knife approaching PowerPoint" or something.
I could just imagine the robot flashing lights, kid approaching. The other place that we've seen it is probably in your personal space, in that specialists are using AI as a diagnostic tool.
Yes, well, the R2A board requires that to have annual medicals, and you're talking to your GP after your usual tests for the year. And I don't know why the conversation popped up, but for ultrascans and all these other sort of tests that you do, because I sort of said, isn't this going to affect the medical lot? He said, it already is. He said, a specialist, the AI ability to detect from ultrasounds and things like that, to detect a pattern or anomaly, is now better than the humans are. Obviously, the trick is, of course, that it's still a human then comes and looks at it and decides whether or not it should be reported and so forth. So the actual decision-making process remains with the human, but the actual first cut of the what does this mean, the AI is obviously doing a very, very good job.
We've sort of talked about this before, and with AI presenting such robust information, I guess, there is a tendency, or there is the potential, that humans can become a little bit lazier and just rely on the information that's provided.
Yeah, but if the AI information is better than the human can give, beyond reasonable doubt, it's going to happen very fast.
So where does that leave individuals and organisations in the liability space? If you just say we've relied on that, don't you have to have some sort of quality assurance processes and proof that says that information is
Yeah, but what you're doing is flipping it around. Whereas previously it was the human supported by the AI, and now it's the AI being supported by the human. That's where it gets tricky, and how that move's going to happen, I don't know. I mean, it's like we were talking about, the roads of the rule on the sea, because the mariners have told us a number of occasions. Big ships have an inordinate capacity to stay away from each other. You don't need special rules for the most part. And one of the reasons why I said the rules existed was so if you did have an incident and you do have to decide who's responsible and who's going to pay for what, here it is written down, even though most of the time it's not particularly relevant.
So it's to assign liability.
It's to assign liability a lot of the time, and I suspect that's going to keep going for some time. It's a bit like, I understand now that the numbers say that if all cars were self-drive to a Tesla standard, there will be less accidents on the road.
Okay, it's an interesting stat.
That is a bit of a problem. But how would you make the shift from assigning personal liability to a driver to the AI? Does that mean all Tesla pays for all accidents here and after?
I don't think they'd sign up to that one.
I don't think they would either.
That's a paradigm shift, isn't it?
It really is.
And you can see that's going to happen. I don't know how the actual turn is going to, finally flip it one way or the other. But it will be an interesting space. But I think from our viewpoint as due diligence engineers, and when we talk to our clients, it's really about considering those other options. And we sort of haven't touched on robotics, but robotics are in a similar sort of space in that we've seen clients using robotics to take the human element out of doing some dangerous works. For example, some water utilities were using drones to do their water sampling so that people didn't have to work over water. So that took away the drowning potential. You've seen it with the clearance divers.
Oh, yes. If you're at sea and you're in a big sea and you think your propeller's failed or something, then it's easy to send down an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle, to have a look, presumably managed by the diver, before you send the diver down. You only send the diver down when you really need to. First of all, you're going to have a look with the machine.
Yeah. So I think that's when robots, are very, very useful.
Well, the rather depressing part about all this was sort of the Ukraine war, which we sort of touched on briefly, because the Ukrainians are very rapidly developing electronic warfare is obviously rocketing along. The jamming of satellite signals and GPS signals and those sorts of things, so things can't navigate. So the other way to do it is to program whatever drone you've got. So if it picks, for example, a Russian tank in the distance, it doesn't care about the signals anymore. It can see the tank, it knows what to do, it knows how to do it, and it just goes and does it. But that sort of remote control weaponry is a kind of a scary idea, but I think that's where we're heading very fast.
Oh, that's totally scary. And then where do the liabilities and, I mean, the ethics and the morals come into that, which I think is a whole different podcast around that sort of stuff. And, you know, where do we start taking responsibility for some of those technologies?
I think the Ukrainians have a fairly clear view of what they intend.
Maybe not in the war space, but hopefully in the engineering and the technological space. You know, AI and robots can be used for improving safety for organisations.
I'm sure that'll be the case.
I think there's still some questions to answer around the liability issues that potentially can arise for the use of the technology. And I think somehow that there's going to have to be some more robust work around quality assurance and making sure the information that you're getting is robust to make those informed decisions and going forward.
Well, the other one that we've mentioned a couple of times is that Sydney Decker fellow from Queensland Uni, I think it is. He's a pilot turned professional psychologist, and he just points out in passing that there are now more safety rules out there that nobody, least of all the person doing the job's got any clue about it. But you can sort of imagine, I don't know whether you want it on your hard hat, but the AI sort of camped in your phone, keeping an eye on the surroundings. And if it sees something which it gets a bad feeling about, it will alert you to it. So you don't really have to know all the details, because it's not possible. So if you start doing something, and we've seen lots of things where people, they've been doing the job that way for years, but when you go and look at it, it says, well, you're a bit lucky here, you didn't get hurt. And if you had an AI watching it, it would have sort of chirped up the first time you tried to do it that way.
I think you're still going back to that, you know, the value in it at the moment is around that situational awareness and giving the person information to make informed decisions.
And alerting you to something which you've still got the decision to make.
Yeah.
It's not doing it for you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us today, Richard. I hope everyone found that interesting. I'm sure this is a space that will proceed at speed over the next...
we will be revisiting this when we hear some particularly new or novel implementation that hasn't happened before.
So thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.